The monarchy exists as an ancient architecture of silence. It is not a collection of individuals, but a 1,000-year institution that demands the total dissolution of the self. To stand within the shadow of the crown is to accept a difficult bargain. Personal truth must always remain secondary to the preservation of the sovereign myth. When the integrity of one member is questioned, the resonance is felt across the entire lineage. This is the inescapable reality of the York Alliance. Despite a legal separation spanning decades, the public identities of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson remain inextricably linked. They function as a singular entity. The complexities of one inevitably define the other. Duchess now faces a calculated intersection of necessity and legacy. A lucrative offer for her narrative represents far more than a financial transaction. It is a strategic gamble. The objective centers on the preservation of Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, whose social standing has become collateral in a conflict beyond their making. History suggests that attempts to clarify a royal crisis through public discourse often achieve the opposite. The abyss only deepens. In this theater, the primary currency is discretion. Silence serves as the ultimate armor, yet immediate need possesses a gravity of its own. Royal exile often culminates in the absolute stillness of high altitudes. On the 16th of April, after 213 days of strategic invisibility, the Duchess emerged in the Austrian Alps. This was no accidental crossing. It was a calculated recalibration of presence within the global landscape. The era of withdrawal has reached its inevitable expiration. The media market responds with clinical velocity. Projections for a definitive account of the York narrative have surged into the realm of extreme speculation. Major American broadcasting entities are reportedly prepared to facilitate a transaction exceeding $2.5 million. This is not a mere request for an interview. It is a formal bid for the rights to deconstruct the most guarded chapter of contemporary royal history. For the Crown, this represents a profound systemic risk. The potential sale of personal testimony for such a premium places the dignity of the institution in direct competition with the necessity of financial solvency. We are witnessing an auction of legitimacy. The currency being traded is not gold, but the perceived integrity of the sovereign bloodline. In this cold environment of ledger and legacy, the preservation of the house now threatens the very myth that sustains it. The Duchess remains the architect of her own narrative. Yet in the architecture of monarchy, the price of survival is often the erosion of the sanctuary itself. The silence has been broken. The valuation has been set. Only the consequence remains. History functions as a relentless cycle of echoes. The blueprint for the current dilemma was drafted 7 decades ago within the gilded isolation of the Parisian suburbs. In 1951, the Duke of Windsor published his memoirs, executing a functional pivot in the history of royal communications. For the first time, a member of the inner sanctum treated the secrets of the firm as a tradable commodity to sustain a life of forced leisure. The Windsor precedent established a dangerous logic. Exile possesses a quantifiable market value. Then, as now, the motivation centered on the preservation of a standard of living that the institution no longer wished to subsidize. While the Duke sought to rehabilitate a reputation tarnished by his wartime associations, the Yorks navigate the complex fallout of the Epstein archives. Both eras share a chilling commonality. It is the calculated conversion of past grandeur into liquid assets. This is the paradox of royal survival. To secure the trajectory of the next generation, the Duchess may feel compelled to liquidate the very privacy that defines their status. A high-value payout offers immediate relief. However, it creates a permanent record of transactional loyalty. The 2019 Newsnight debacle remains the ultimate cautionary tale. It proved that when a royal attempts to explain the inexplicable, the myth dissolves into the mundane. Exile carries a staggering price. The Duke of Windsor paid it in the currency of his dignity. The Duchess of York now stands before the same cold ledger. The palace now confronts a specter that protocol cannot exorcise. The unsealing of archival records has introduced what historians term a systemic vulnerability. It is no longer a question of character. It is a question of the ledger. Correspondence from 2009 details a definitive request for capital, £100,000, intended to settle the Duchess's private obligations. In the rigid hierarchy of the British state, financial desperation is the ultimate breach of the fortress. It signals a catastrophic loss of autonomy. The York defense has pivoted toward a doctrine of survivalist isolation. Her advisors now frame the 2011 severance of ties as a response to external pressure rather than a voluntary withdrawal. This is a strategic attempt to recast a former associate as a source of systematic intimidation. The institution views these revelations through a colder, more clinical lens. The admission of financial reliance on a figure of such infamy creates a structural flaw in the Crown's perceived independence. In a reputational economy, debt is a confession of vulnerability. The palace does not fear the scandal itself. It fears the precedent of a royal being leveraged. When private debts become the public liabilities of a thousand-year institution, the architecture of the monarchy begins to shift. Silence was once the ultimate defense. Now, the archives possess a clarity that no courtier can obscure. The burden of history is heavy, but the weight of the ledger is absolute. The 1995 panorama precedent remains the definitive cautionary tale of royal volatility. It demonstrated that when the inner sanctum attempts to bypass the institutional architecture of silence, the result is rarely liberation. For the Princess of Wales, the move toward transparency functioned as a mechanism for final displacement. Her testimony did not secure her position. It accelerated her severance. We now observe a similar pattern of terminal urgency. This potential media intervention is framed not as a reclamation of truth, but as the final liquidation of a reputation, while a commercial market for it still exists. The asset being traded is no longer the individual. It is the perceived proximity to the crown. This creates a secondary crisis for the lineage. Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie occupy a precarious territory, tethered to a narrative they did not author. To exchange silence for capital is to risk their remaining standing for temporary solvency. In the contemporary landscape, transparency is a weaponized medium. Audiences have transitioned from passive observers to forensic critics of media manipulation. Any attempt at revisionism is met with clinical scrutiny. Sovereign myth dissolves. An interview is not a defense. The media does not offer the sanctuary of a court. It offers only the crucible where the legacy of a millennium is refined into a headline. The House of Windsor is undergoing a fundamental structural reconfiguration. The sacred aura of the bloodline has been recalibrated into a measurable market asset. This is the final commodification of the inner sanctum. For King Charles III, calculation has moved beyond the personal. It is now purely existential. We are observing the dawn of the York succession, a cold, absolute decoupling of this branch from the sovereign brand. It is an act of surgical preservation. The crown is pivoting toward a corporate architecture. Divine right has been superseded by the rigid enforcement of the non-disclosure agreement. Royal service, once a vocation of the soul, now mirrors the sterile legalities of a global boardroom. The era of mystical authority has reached its sunset. In its place stands the machinery of information management. The scepter remains. Yet its brilliance is no longer derived from ancient myth, but from the negotiated terms of a media conglomerate. This is the new reality of the throne. If you value this analytical perspective on the evolving state of the monarchy, subscribe and join our community of thinkers. Share your assessment in the comments. Define whether the institution can survive this transition into a purely transactional era.